right. Good morning, folks. This is ICUJP, Interfaith Communities for Justice and Peace, for Friday morning, January 10th, 2025. And I'm Rick. I'm the communications and social media person for the group. And it's very nice to see you all this morning. It's been a pretty eventful week in Southern California, and we have a lot to go through. And in light of that, I wanted to say we're doing something a little bit different as far as our program and as far as our timing. So later on in the program, we're going to have a extended group reflection in our closing circle, because we know that for a lot of people here, there's the fires in Southern California are very much prevalent in their minds and in their lives. So what we're going to do is about 9:15, we're going to all get some space to talk about that. So right now, well, first off, before we get into that, I wanted to, acknowledge Steve Rhodey, our chairman, who wanted to say a couple words right at the beginning.
Thank you, Rick. You know, we thought long and hard about holding this session, but we decided that ICUJP has been a respite and a haven and a safe place for 23 years. We were formed immediately in the wake of 9/11. Our convener, the beloved Reverend George Regas of All Saints Church in Pasadena, convened us, brought together religious activists. We chose our name, Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. Each one of those words meant something, and it has meant something. We have convened over 1,000 webinars every Friday morning, with a few days off for holidays, since 9/11. And for many of us, this has been our home. This has been our mosque, our synagogue, our church, our meeting hall, and our place to gather. We are going to set aside an extended time toward the end of our program during our normal closing circle for people to express themselves and share their thoughts and prayers and their situation. I don't think any one of us, by one degree of separation, if not ourselves, we know people who've been evacuated. We know people who've lost their homes. We know people whose lives have been disrupted, and we know that everyone in Los Angeles County is suffering from poor air quality and the total disruption of this catastrophic event. ICUJP is going to take a hard look at what role it could play in the coming weeks and months. But it's in the heart of ICUJP to immediately recognize that thousands of people will now be without homes. They will be joining people who are without homes every day in Los Angeles County and elsewhere. And so the only, and I almost hesitate to use the notion of a silver lining in this catastrophe, but if there is one, it is to draw attention to the fact of what it means to be houseless, and maybe find it in the spirit of LA in rebuilding, not just to put people back in the houses they occupied, but to recognize that we should put everyone in safe and sustained and long-term housing. So preliminarily, that's something that ICUJP expects to focus on, and there may be other initiatives as well. And we invite you to contact Rick on the email address with which you got the notice for today's meeting and offer your suggestions. It so happens that our board is having an extended board meeting next Friday, and we'll be taking all of this up. One consequence of this is that we had planned tomorrow, Saturday, to hold our annual Close Guantanamo rally at the West Side building in Los Angeles, and we are postponing that event. If you haven't seen the announcement yet, that event is postponed. It will not be held tomorrow at the West Side building. Please tell anybody you know that might have been planning to come. We have not canceled that event. We have postponed that event because in the midst of the horror of these uh, fires, the horror of human rights violations in Guantanamo, in Gaza, in the West Bank, and around the world continue. And we're going to have to stay vigilant and be witnesses to all of that, even as LA rebuilds. I did want to take a moment to give John Crampner an opportunity just to put in your minds the nature of that event, what we are planning to do, and why we're doing it. John has been stalwart in organizing this event, I believe, for over 12 years that we've done it. So, John, tell the audience this this meeting is being recorded and will be shared more widely. Why do we do this? We still need to recognize, and that's why we have our special guest with us today. But tell us about the event and what will take place as soon as it's rescheduled.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Basically, we have our annual Close Guantanamo Now protest because most of the American people have forgotten the travesties of justice and human rights associated with it, but we have not. I'm pleased to note that Rebecca Husaini, one of our guests this morning, will be a speaker at that event. Our other speakers will be Michael Rapkin, who's a member of the Guantanamo Bar, Esty Chandler of KPFK's Middle Eastern Focus, Ryan Wentz of Code Pink, Shane Cuhey of Out Against War, Paul Roberson of the Los Angeles chapter of the U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee, and Jerome Palacios Meyerson of Jewish Voice for Peace. So this will be postponed, and keep your eyes peeled for when it's rescheduled, and I hope you can all make it then.
Great. Thank you, John, and thank you publicly for all of the work you put into this event. Please stay tuned, everyone. There will be a full announcement on when we choose just the right date for this event to be resumed. And I turn it back to our trustee, Rick Banyalis.
Hello. So thank you guys very much for, on the email invite that got you here with that Zoom code. There was some information on the group. We've been around, as Steve mentioned, about 23 years. Started shortly after September 11, 2001. And we were formed under the idea that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And we've taken that to be an extremely broad idea. because it is a very big task. We feel that this is part of our mission. Calling attention to Guantanamo has been part of our mission. Talking about the crisis of the unhoused in Southern California and around the world is part of our mission. Obviously, bombing cities wherever they are in the world and whatever community it is, calling it out for the atrocity it is part of our mission. So we are here because this call to essentially hold hands in cyberspace after a tragedy like this is part of our mission as well. And we've been venturing out into the world after COVID. That tends to, as we do programs, it tends to incur costs like sound, lighting, all that kind of stuff. Maybe a venue that we'd have to rent or pay for. Things like printing pieces of paper. You forget that people actually want you to pay for that kind of stuff. So as we do that, we very much appreciate any financial help you can give. On the invite, there was a section for you if you want to donate to ICUJP. You can do that. You can do that either as a one-time thing or as monthly installments. And anything that you put in there is very, very much appreciated, and we will be putting to good use. So very much thank you for that. So as part of what we wanted to feature, especially as it gets into the January 11th anniversary of where most communities around the country are bringing attention to what's been happening in Guantanamo. We want to invite Rebecca Husaini and Haris Tarin from Muslim Public Affairs Council to speak very briefly on that. So I wanted to turn over the program to, I think, Rebecca first. So if everybody else can go on mute, that would be very much appreciated. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us here today. So nice to be able to address this wonderful group about this critical issue that has been on our nation's conscience for a very long time, far too long. The continued existence of Guantanamo Bay and the broader implications of these policies that grew out of 9/11, the national security policies that single out Muslims. For over 2 decades, it's been a stark symbol of how fear-based policies can undermine America's core values. It has fueled the dangerous narrative that America is at war with Islam. It deepens divisions and jeopardizes the safety of our communities. This is not national security, it's institutionalized Islamophobia. And these policies don't make us safer. Here at MPAC, we believe that it's long past time to close Guantanamo and finally dismantle these policies that represent fear and division. And so I'm going to hand it over now to our Vice President of Policy and Programming, who's based in Washington, D.C., who can speak further about how these dangerous policies manifest themselves in Islamophobia against our communities. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, good morning, and hope everyone is safe, and praying for everyone in Southern California. Where I'm from, Southern California is home to me. I haven't been there for over a decade now, but I haven't lived there in over a decade, but I still consider it home. And many of the reports that I'm seeing and the videos and the photos is just heartbreaking. And I'm praying to God that you all are safe and your families are safe. Excuse me as well. I'm a little under the weather, so excuse my voice. And thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction. Friends, we're approaching tomorrow the anniversary of Guantanamo Bay, over 20 years of this stain on the American conscience being open. And there's much to say about Guantanamo Bay, the symbolism of Guantanamo Bay, the actual prison of Guantanamo Bay, the policies that allowed Guantanamo Bay to happen. But one thing I'll start with is that Guantanamo Bay, unfortunately, has become a symbol of our failed war policies. It is a symbol of everything that we've done over since 9/11 that has not worked. Every step that we've taken, either in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in the Middle East currently with our policies towards Gaza and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, everything that we've done that has militarized our policies in every single way. And not only militarized our policies, but militarized, unfortunately, the conscience of our policy makers. That is even more critical than the militarization of policies. Guantanamo Bay is the symbol of that. When Donald Rumsfeld and George Bush and Dick Cheney got together to open Guantanamo Bay as a black site, it was a black stain on the conscience of us as Americans. And it will forever be. Once we are long gone, our kids are gone, our grandkids are gone, Guantanamo Bay will remain that dark and black stain on the American conscience that we will continue to have to deal with. And unfortunately, to be honest with you all, we as a nation have not reckoned with our failed policies of the past 20 years and Guantanamo Bay. My family comes from Afghanistan. I left when I was 5 years old. I understand war and conflict deeply, personally, in every aspect of my being and my fiber. We were refugees from the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan and all the failures of that Cold War between the Soviet Union and our nation and all our neighboring nations. But we as Americans didn't learn the lesson from what happened in the 80s or 70s or in Vietnam or in Panama or any of these conflicts that we've been involved in. What we did when George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld opened Guantanamo Bay, they etched in the conscience of our policymakers, the people I deal with every day here in Washington, the idea that we can dehumanize others. And when you dehumanize others, it is very easy then to take their rights away, to take their freedoms away, but not to take their dignity away, but not only that, to take their life away and to take away every aspect and erase them and their identity. And I'll tell you, when you look at Guantanamo Bay and the symbolism of it and how it developed and evolved, we picked up randomly tons of people. The majority of people at Guantanamo Bay were not charged with anything, the absolute majority. And until today, the majority have not been charged with anything. We originally had 780 people, 85 people in Guantanamo. We are down now, thank God, we're down to 15 people. In the past few weeks, we've continued to release a few folks. And that just tells you that we never charged any of these folks with anything. We generally had to pay other countries to take these people. So it was a moral stain and moral cost on our conscience, but also a financial cost. That place has cost us billions of dollars to maintain over the past 20 years. Our tax dollars go to keep that place open. And for 15 people, we spend millions and millions of dollars a day. Imagine those millions or those billions of dollars that went into understanding others, that went into diplomacy, that went to conflict resolution in ways that we were not militarizing our policies, where we're actually, I try to be as pragmatic as possible because I have to deal with people here in Washington in every way. The State Department has something called the IVLP program. What it does is it brings people from different parts of the world, and especially places where they don't necessarily have a positive image and understanding of America and Americans. So what it does is it asks our embassies around the country, around the world, to identify people who can come to the US, spend a couple of weeks, travel around the country, engage with Americans, engage with civil society, and understand America better. And President Kennedy was the one who initiated this program, and it's actually, well, it's a brilliant program, and it costs pennies on the dollar for us as Americans. The Congress doesn't really fund it much, but the impact that the IVLP program has in changing hearts, minds, and attitudes of people towards American outweighs any of the billions and trillions of dollars that we spent on war and the war machine and the militarization of our policies. So we've allowed our policymakers, and I won't say us as Americans, we've allowed our policymakers to etch in their mind to prioritize war, to prioritize militarization, to prioritize conflict over diplomacy, over engagement, over understanding. And that, unfortunately, is what causes a Guantanamo Bay. And it further enhances that idea that conflict works. And it dehumanizes. When we, the past year, I just left government. I was in government for 10 years. I just, in September of 2024, I left government and I joined the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And I spent 10 years in the national security apparatus of the US government, understand the Homeland Security and national security apparatus. What I saw over the past year in Gaza, the hoods on people's heads, hands tied behind their back, um, naked except in underwear, or just in like an orange jumpsuit, on the ground, on rubble, on dirt, on rocks, and hundreds of men lined up like that in Gaza over the past year. You know where that came from? That came from Guantanamo. That's what we used to do to people in Guantanamo. We would hood them, we would put them in orange jumpsuits, sometimes naked, and we would leave them outside in the freezing cold in Guantanamo Bay. And the world watches and the world learns. And the world then also excuses their actions and their behaviors based on what we do as America. And so when the Chinese inter-Muslims, Uyghurs, or the Egyptians, or the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, or the Congo, or India, or our allies around the world, or Russia with the Ukrainians, when that happens, they have a model that they learn from. And unfortunately, that we were their model. The narrative of counterterrorism and the war on terror, we were the ones that instituted those policies. And now those policies are being used by our allies, even if we try to shed those policies of the past 20 years. So Guantanamo Bay is a symbol of all that we created, unfortunately, as a U.S. Policy-making machine. We facilitated it, we created it, we allowed it to happen, and we televised it to the world. Unfortunately, we televised our own shame. That's what when sometimes I talk to folks and I talk about Guantanamo, we televised our own shame. At least other countries like the Chinese will not televise any of their shameful behavior. You will never see a picture or a video of concentration camps of the Uyghurs, right? You won't see that. But we televised it and we showed the world it. And unfortunately now it's being used against us and against our interests and against our policies and against our values. So that is Guantanamo Bay in a nutshell for us. And it is Americans like yourselves. It is Americans like yourselves whose conscience has not been stained by it and you have not accepted it that are important in this conversation because In a few days, a new administration will come into to power. There are 15 people left in Guantanamo Bay. My hope is that in the next few days, those 15 people also are transferred somewhere else, um, uh, and that stain technically closes down because the industry will not close down, but the site will hopefully close down, and that we can start to have conversations like this about what we've done and what type of impact that's had on us. So thank you for having this conversation, and if there are a couple of questions, would be happy to answer.
Yep. We do have limited time with Rebecca and Haris. They're both going into another program. They have a busy morning. So if you have any questions, if you would like to raise your hand, Quanta, yeah, if you can ask your question, that'd be great.
Thank you very much. I'd be curious to know when you said that the Guantanamo Bay will be closed. I hope so. You are absolutely. But where will they take those people you were talking? Maybe they'll be taken somewhere else. Thank you.
Correct. So as I mentioned, absolute majority of these detainees have not been charged. There's only a couple, like the mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and a couple of others who will probably be charged somewhere, and so that's difficult to actually take them out. And no prison actually wants to accept Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in on U.S. soil. That's been tried. No city, no federal facility or any type of facility is willing to accept him, unfortunately. So that's complicated things. Um, the Most of the detainees are essentially handed over to other governments to to be watched, to be surveilled, and they essentially live out their lives in those other places. A lot of them have gone to Kosovo, Albania. The latest batch went to Oman. Oman took them and have, they essentially live under house arrest or something of that sort and are watched very closely. They don't, a few of them, ironically, this tells you how failed our policies are. A few of them that we sent back to the Taliban, who we fought for 20 years, are now ministers in the new Taliban government in Afghanistan. Just if you ever wake up thinking that you have failed in life or that you've made a lot of mistakes, just know that we spent $2 trillion finding a group of people, putting them in Guantanamo Bay, letting them go. Those people went back into government, and now we're dealing with those same people. To tell you the failure of our policies. Like that's the magnitude of failure. So most of them are in different places, different countries who've taken them, and we essentially give money to those countries. It's almost like a bribe. So, a place like Kosovo or Albania, they need assistance. They need aid, different types of aid, economic aid, military aid. We increase aid for them, and they take a few of that's what we've done everywhere. In different countries. And the 15 that are left, there's a couple of them that cannot go anywhere else because they will be charged domestically, but that's a complicated process as well. And then hopefully the rest will be also freed.
Thank you very much. Vinny, you had a quick question.
Two brief points. The first is that there's a member of the ICUJP who is not here today. That is Robert Corsini. He has done incredible work following up on detainees who have been released, and yet their imprisonment continues in the countries they've been released to. And unfortunately, the names of the two individuals that he interviewed escape me, but it is well worthwhile to reach out to Robert and see that. And remember that we have a debt to those people moving forward. The second thing is, as I look to my left, I see my dear friend John Crampner. And as I look lower to my right, I see my dear friend Carol Francis. I am curious to find out, once the fires die down, when we can have our protest against Guantanamo, as we do annually, but because of the fires has been delayed. Thank you.
I can give you, as the communications person, I can let you know we're in the process right now of determining when we're going to do that. I'd kind of like to do it before the 20th, because I don't want to. All of us could be enemies of the state at that point, but we that's my ideal. But we're going to be hopefully working on that this weekend and early next week to come up with a new date. So,
Please keep me in the loop, Rick.
oh yes, for sure. John. Oh, I'm sorry. You had another question too, right?
No, I just wanted to mention the work that Robert Corsini had done
Yes.
and the fact that we have to remember when they're released. Christmas
I'm
not over.
also, yeah, that's true. As you're speaking, John, I'm going to look for that Robert Corsini video and put it in the chat as well. John, you had a question.
I think. Yeah, again, first I want to just thank Harris and Rebecca for their presentation. Harris, I was wondering if you could speak briefly, and Vinny kind of touched on this. The moral, as important as it is to close Guantanamo and get the people released from it, the moral injustice of what's been called Guantanamo 2.0, the fact that these men who did nothing, were charged with nothing, when they're released, instead of getting to go home, they're sent to countries where they have no connection, they know nobody, they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture. And it almost seems to me like a form of Calvinism, the elect and the damned. We are the elect, they are the damned. In any case, any thoughts you have on that would be appreciated.
Yeah, so I've had a lot. So I've had a lot of conversations around Guantanamo Bay before, during the Obama years, the first term of the Obama administration. I don't know if you all remember. Uh, President Obama made closing Guantanamo Bay a campaign promise. That was actually one of his campaign promises, and he said, on day one, I will try to issue an executive order to start the process of closing Guantanamo Bay, and he did. I mean, not many people actually know this. President Obama initiated a process to try to close the prison. He put together a group of lawyers at the Department of Defense to initiate a process, but he failed. He failed because Congress refused to go along with the process. Congress would not fund the process. Congress would not allow the initial process to even. One of my close friends was a JAG lawyer at the DoD who was asked to work on that during the President Obama's time, and it just didn't work. And so in his second term, I was invited to a dinner with President Obama, an iftar dinner, and I was sitting at his table, and I asked him very honestly about Guantanamo Bay. I said, "So, Mr. President, what do you think was why weren't you successful in being able to close down the prison?" And he kind of like shrugged his shoulders and said it was above my pay grade. And I said, "You're the damn president of the United States. Like, is there a pay grade that is beyond yours?" And he said, "It's, Congress would just not allow it." He said, "We are not, as a nation, we are not there yet to be able to account for what we did and what we've done with Guantanamo Bay." And so we're not able to do this. But one thing that President Obama did, which was positive, was that he started this process of getting folks transferred to different countries. Now, as you mentioned, some of these poor folks have actually had really difficult transitions. Some of them go to authoritarian regimes, places that don't have any rule of law or law and order, and so they're essentially made to live either in real prisons or under house arrest. And nobody really, they kind of like die down. There's no media that's around it. These countries don't allow any media to engage them. They don't allow any sunlight to basically address the issue. But then there are other countries that have allowed them to live, semi or more normal lives. Some of them went back to the UK. And the legal challenge, the one thing I was going to say, I digressed a bit. The main challenge is that the country of origins of these individuals don't want them back. So the Egyptians, Egypt does not want the Egyptians back. The Libyans, Libya does not want them back. Pakistanis, for a long time, Pakistan did not want them back. Now they're being a little bit more, they've taken a couple of folks. So, that's the other issue is many of the countries that they originated from aren't willing to take them back because for them, they think that these individuals will either become some type of they'll have some type of martyr status or hero status, and people will congregate around them, and it will cause political challenges for them. So that is the other issue. I mean, in all honesty, the DoD would have been happy to send them back to their countries of origin, but that's just not possible. The most recent ones, Oman took them because the countries of origin did not want to take them. Prior to that, a couple went back to who were Afghans, went to Afghanistan. So when the Taliban took over Afghanistan, they were willing to take back their detainees. So, of course, there are difficulties. Of course, we haven't really tried hard enough, but there's also challenges with sending them back home because they are not being accepted by their countries of origin.
Yeah. This has been very informative and very up to the minute. As people can see, this has been a fluid situation, especially over the last week. So, Hadis and Rebecca. Rebecca, I don't know if you had any final words before we let you guys go.
No, I don't. I think Haris covered pretty much all of
Yeah.
it. I do want to thank all of you for having us on the program to talk about this. So really appreciate it.
No, thank you very much. I saw your note about maybe keeping in touch with Vinny and Marcy. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna,
Yeah,
get
I disseminated it, but yes, happy to keep in touch with any one of you to carry on all the work.
Rebecca, I already sent you an email with all my contact information. When you have time, you can get a hold of me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank Marcy for constantly being on top of this Code Pink. Dog bless Code Pink.
It sounds good. And cats too. I want to make sure we give
Yes,
equal rights,
yes,
equal
cats.
acknowledgement to both superior species. Hadis and and Rebecca, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you all. Have a great day, and please stay safe.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
And feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we really appreciate that. And we have a packed program today. We wanted to speak we have a program with Seth Donnelly with Taxpayers Against Genocide. Before we do that, I did put in the chat the video that Robert Corsini did. There's a YouTube link. Also, things that you can do right now while this administration is still in office. Send them a note. You can do that. Call up the White House line and let them know that that establishment is still a stain on the U.S. On the honor of this country. So. We did want to go to the next part of the program. So, Steve, if you don't mind introducing Seth Donnelly.
It's totally my pleasure. Seth Donnelly is an activist. We've asked him to weave into his remarks something about himself, his path to this work, what motivates him every day, and has done so for years. But today's program focuses on an extraordinary lawsuit that Seth helped organize under the group Taxpayers Against Genocide. I'm going to let him fully elaborate on that case, and we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers as well. Seth, welcome to ICUJP.
Thanks, Steve, and good to be here with you all. I'm glad that I was able to hear that last presentation too. And I'm following McGregor. We were just in a Zoom about the missile launching down in on Chumash land. So I just before I get started, I'll keep it brief too, so we have time for questions. And I know you have a packed program, but I tried that email for the while they were presenting about closing Guantanamo. And I don't know if it's just because they're on their last days, but the only thing I could do is ask for federal assistance. They didn't allow me to email comments to the White House. So maybe maybe phone calls would work on that one, or old school letters. I'm not sure if anybody else had that experience.
Maybe they changed their address, so I'll
Yeah,
take a
because then
look at.
I searched different ways to email the White House, and because sometimes with these things you got to do it on. We're all so busy. Um, Basically, I'm not too far from Steve. I'm up in Sonoma County. Well, we're both in Sonoma County. I'm in an unincorporated area just outside of Sonoma, the town. And like all over the country over the last year or so, 15 months plus, there's been all sorts of grassroots activism trying to stop the genocide in Gaza. And a lot of us engaged in, of course, street protests, endless attempts to email, write your congresspeople, tell them not to fund the genocide. There was a lot of work to get ceasefire resolutions passed by city councils. And in some areas, the city councils passed them, like in Cotati nearby here, and in a lot of others, like Sebastopol and Sonoma, they didn't. And almost uniformly, our representatives on a federal level just dismissed our efforts. I remember in last January when I was teaching at Rancho Cotati High School in social studies and public high school in Roanoke Park, students who were concerned. They had formed a human rights club that I was advising, and they reached out to our representative, Mike Thompson, and said, we would like to meet with you about what's happening. And to his credit, he actually came to the high school and met with the students, and they actually laid it out. This is right after the ICJ made its ruling that South Africa's case against genocide was South Africa's case against Israel was plausible, that there's a plausible case of genocide. And then, but then it was pretty apparent when the students were pressing him, and we all were, like, will you not vote for more military aid, that he stonewalled it. And sure enough, 4 months later, on April 20th, he and along with the majority of other representatives in the House voted to send 26.38 billion more to Israel. And that was not only after the ICJ ruling back in January, but some of you might remember in February, both Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International issued findings that Israel was defying the ICJ provisions to avoid genocide. In March, Francesca Albanese issued her stark report, Anatomy of a Genocide, and she's the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories. And that report said that clearly Israel had crossed the line. And then there was just an accumulation. And now we've seen it, just in the last few months, Doctors Without Borders and more. So when Thompson voted on April 20th to re-up 26 plus billion more, not only did he dismiss the students and dismiss the majority opinion of his constituents, but he was he was doing so in the face of this overwhelming evidence. So in the summer, a bunch of us who were doing the grassroots activism said, let's go out and protest. He does an annual fundraising dinner in front of at a very upscale winery. So we went to it, and his district cuts across different county lines. So there's people from Yolo County, which is where Davis, California is. There's people in, all over. So Lake County. So we kind of did this cross county organizing for this protest. And then in the course of doing that, we also started thinking about, like, well, what's next? We can't just keep being performative here if he's not. So then we started thinking, well, let's sue him. Let's file a class action lawsuit, because what they're doing with this is illegal. And in the course of that organizing, we also connected with activists who are in neighboring communities and counties that are represented by Jared Huffman, who has the exact same vote of supporting the 26 3.8 billion more. And Huffman had also ignored his constituents. In fact, Code Pink activist Leslie Angeline in Marin just got done with a 31-day hunger strike, demanding that Huffman meet with her, and he refused. So she's one of our plaintiffs. So at that point, around August, September, we were like, in the course of all connecting with each other, we're like, let's make a massive class action. And so we formed a class cutting across 10 county lines, and we started consulting lawyers. And the vast majority of attorneys were like, walk away, you can't sue your congressman, it's a waste of your time. But then we found a progressive attorney, and we started going deeper. And then we started saying there's actually a real case here, that their immunity is not absolute. Like if you look at the boundaries of congressional immunity, they're not immune from doing things that are illegal acts, like taking bribery. And then we started looking at the fact that per the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 establishes that using our tax dollars should only be within the parameters of what they call the quote-unquote general welfare. And then Amendment 9 says we have more rights than the rights that are listed in the first 1 through 8 amendments. That's called the Implied Rights, amendment. And that's exactly what the kids have used when they sued over climate change. I don't know if you follow that remarkable case, Juliana versus US, where these students sued and said, we have a 9th Amendment implied right to a sustainable world and sustainable earth. So by linking Article 1, general welfare, with our implied right of what we were arguing is we have a right to have our taxes used in a lawful manner that's truly in the general welfare, that they can't use our tax dollars to fund genocide. That's also bolstered by the fact that the U.S. has ratified the Genocide Convention in 1988. I mean, they did it like 40 years after the fact, but they still did it. And even though they had some exemptions, they didn't exempt themselves to the part of the convention that prohibits complicity in genocide. So in other words, and per the U.S. Constitution, when a treaty is ratified, it becomes part of the supreme law of the land. So we said, not only are you not spending towards general welfare, you're using our tax dollars to violate a treaty that the U.S. has ratified. And then there's a host of federal laws, like some of you have heard, like the Leahy Amendment and various laws that prohibit. So we lawyered up, we built the class, we kept growing the class. Now we have almost over 800 people. And on December 19th, we filed the complaint against Representatives Mike Thompson and Jared Huffman, and they were served on Christmas Eve through the special council in Washington D.C. And it's since sent kind of shockwaves across. Fortunately, it got covered by some of the progressive press and some of the mainstream press, and we created an email account for this, and we've just been inundated with people all across the country wanting to do the exact same thing. And we have this remarkable coalition of people who are in their, elders to young people to Palestinian leaders in Northern California, Jewish leaders. And so we're going to do a webinar on January 25th. That's the registration link for the webinar. It's going to be at 10 a.m. California time. That Roots Action, we're working, they're part of the TAG umbrella group is not just individual activists, but it's a growing umbrella of different organizations from Code Pink and Roots Action and many groups. So we're doing this webinar, and you're welcome to spread the word, to your networks. And it's primarily geared for people across the country that might want to replicate the lawsuit. We're going to share in more depth than I am right now about how we did it and what's going on. But that's happening. And then let me give you all this link to our link tree. Everything's just occurred.
I put that in the chat
Oh, you
already
did the link tree?
Yeah.
Okay, great. My fault.
No. I figured you were multitasking, so.
Yeah. No, the link tree is very helpful because it gives you a lot of information on. And what's cool is this is all just people working together, all unpaid, pushing it, and we're not. It's hard to keep up now because it's hit a positive nerve across the country. Our eyes are wide open that the legal fight is completely uphill. But we do think our argument is correct. It's not just a stunt. And regardless of what happens in court, I mean, knock on wood, we would actually get a hearing and we could keep, but no matter what, it's building a mass movement to really say the source of this genocide is our money. And we'll no longer participate in what Hannah Arendt said, the banality of evil. We're done. We're done with, we're trying to beat our head against the wall with city councils, and we're done with emails that get ignored. And we're not done with street protests because that's what we do, but even that by itself, it has to be part of a broader strategy. So I just reposted, I saw a request there to repost it. There was one last point I was going to make in terms of, oh yeah, we are now looking at expanding the lawsuit into other parts of the north. See, the federal court of Northern California, that district covers not just our 10 counties going up to Oregon, because we've got those, but it includes San Francisco Bay Area, Alameda, going all the way down to the peninsula, even Monterey. So we're in the process of exploring to expand that so that the defendants, and we can amend the complaint. This will be officially announced pending our research, but it should be officially announced next week that we're going to expand it to file against Pelosi and the other reps that have funded genocide, as well as our senators, Butler and Padilla at the time, both of whom who on the Senate end of the bill, April 30th, voted to do the same. So that's I'll stop there and see if you guys got questions.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much, Seth. This has been very informative. I know that there'll be a few different questions. John, I'll put the time in for in the chat as well for the webinar.
Thank you. Question, Seth, thank you so much for what you're doing. And is it now possible for other organizations to join this class action, or do we have to file a separate one against somebody like Alex Padilla? And who is the lawyer?
No, you could absolutely join. What's beautiful about one of the things that's cool about the process is that even after we file the complaint, we can continue to grow both the general class, like each county has what are called class reps. We're the people on court record that are the plaintiffs. So like a few of us are plaintiffs out of Sonoma, for example. But once we file the amended complaint, that's done. We can't add more class reps, but we continue to grow the general class, which is everybody just signs on. So you'll see in the link tree, there's a way to do that. And we're right now, like I said, in the process of expanding it so that if you live in Alameda, San Francisco, you can join the class. But organizations, no matter where you are, can sign on as and endorse it. Just let me know. You can email me. We actually have an email just for the project, which is Class Action Against Genocide. I'll put this in the chat. So if your organization wants to sign on, even if you're in Southern California, we're creating a list of organizations with, please send us your logo, and it looks like maybe Tikkun is just the latest to sign on. They're finalizing that, but that's very exciting. Michael Lerner's group, Tikkun.
Yes.
And
Seth, is this against like all of these lawmakers in California who voted for this on April 20th, or?
The lawsuit would be targeting just when we amend it, it would just be the Northern California, all the people that report to that under the like you might say the jurisdiction of the federal district court of Northern California. So only those representatives would be sued that are part of that area. Although the senators too, because the senators. So if you're down in Southern Cal, you could organize a class, and you could say Southern Cal branch of TAG, Taxpayers Against Genocide. We could talk about that, and then you can use our complaint. Like if in the link tree, you'll be able to access the complaint, and the attorney, Dean Royers, a remarkable National Lawyers Guild attorney, has given us the green light to use his argument as a template. And so you could organize a class down in Southern California and then bring your reps to the Federal District Court of Southern California. I assume it's probably in LA, you know.
But we could join now because at least it's against our US senators who represent the entire state.
Yeah, so you could, for this particular complaint that we're doing, we're just taking folks that live within the what you call the peninsula, right? Like for those of you that are like down by Palo Alto, and even Monterey, all the way up to Oregon. So if you're anywhere there, you could join, because again, that's within the jurisdiction, in a sense, of that particular federal court. If you're further south, you would organize your class, and you'd still sue the senators like we are, because we all have to deal with them. But then you would also identify your representatives. Does that make sense?
Yes. So
it's based on the jurisdiction.
If you're in the South, if you're in the South, in LA or Santa Barbara with Central Coast, you're not signing on to this. You'd have to take what
you're not as an individual. Your organization could. Like politically, organizations can say, hey, the Unitarians of California sign on, or what, Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve, you have a question.
Thank you. Well, first, I'm going to do something we do from time to time. I am convening an emergency meeting of the Board of Directors of ICUJP. We have several board members right here on our screen. This lawsuit goes to the heart of what ICUJP is all about. Literally, our mission is that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. So I would invite a motion from a member of the Board of Directors of ICUJP to support Taxpayers Against Genocide lawsuit here and elsewhere. Carol Francis?
Yes. Carol
Francis moved the motion. Do we have a second? I see Jasmine searching for her unmute button. I will take that as a second.
I think you see Dr. Ruby, I saw.
Dr. Ruby, very good. So that's moved and seconded. All board members in favor and all honorary board members in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye, aye. So that passes. So we'll follow up immediately, Seth. But I wanted to take a few minutes. We have some time up until 9:15 to really build out and expand on the concept behind this lawsuit, because I think for most people, many people, it's coming as a new idea. And I think it's very innovative. There are exceptions. Seth pointed out that these lawsuits are an uphill battle. The law is an instrument of the American establishment. The law is built to block the people from using the legal system in this fashion. Despite the fact, and I want to touch on the Leahy Act and some of the legal principles behind the lawsuit, but any objective person would see that these votes are illegal, that they violate U.S. and international law. So any visitor from Mars would say, well, of course the courts should put a stop to this. But the law has built doctrines. There's a very two nefarious doctrines. The political question doctrine and the state secrets privilege. And by the way, I'm not telling the Trump administration anything new in listing their potential defenses to this lawsuit, or the Biden administration for that matter. But the law builds up beyond the Constitution these kinds of defenses. So the state secrets doctrine says, oh my, if your lawsuit touches on national security, We can't jeopardize national security and key lawsuits. And to link this to Guantanamo, key lawsuits in the Guantanamo area have been dismissed under the State Secrets Act. So that'll be a challenge. And then the political question doctrine, God forbid a lawsuit should raise a political question, but many judges and the Supreme Court have said, oh no, if a lawsuit touches on a political question, we cannot intrude on Congress and the other branches. So those are going to have to be addressed. But Seth and his group have put themselves in the hands of excellent lawyers. So what I want to turn this into a question, Seth, is tell us a little more about the Leahy Amendment, some of the various legal doctrines that you believe Congress is violating domestically and internationally in this, that are being drawn to light in this case. And there is precedent of taxpayer lawsuits going forward on the basis that you are funding. This often comes up in the establishment of religion area, and Seth may be familiar with that case. So take some time, expand on the legal doctrines and some of the precedent in this field.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and definitely get to the heart of your question. But when you were talking about how the law can become an instrument of or is an instrument most often of the establishment, thinking about connected to our last speakers, when that sort of Orwellian argument that the department, that the U.S. government made under both Bush, and later even in a sense under Obama, not about Guantanamo, but of course Obama was rationalizing extrajudicial executions, right? But with the Guantanamo argument, it was like, well, they're not U.S. citizens, or they're not on U.S. soil, so they're not protected by, they're on U.S. territory, they're on a naval base, but somehow they're not protected by the Constitution. And then the Bush administration said, well, they're not protected by the Geneva Conventions because they're not prisoners of war. They came up with that new category. They're illegal combatants. Therefore, they're in this legal black hole, and we can do whatever our last speaker was saying, completely dehumanize. So there is that kind of lawfare thing that's constant, in the cases that you brought up about the political doctrine. That's unfortunately what happened to, some of you might remember that in November of 2023, the Center for Constitutional Rights and joined with some Palestinian families who were plaintiffs, sued the Biden administration over genocide in the same federal district court that we're dealing with, a different judge. And the court ruled, even though there was powerful evidence of genocide, that they don't handle foreign policy. And so we were inspired by that class action. And that ruling came out, I think it was just last January or end of January, this year, of last year. And we disagree with the court's ruling, but where we think this is a different angle is we're talking directly about our domestic tax dollars and the tax and spend authority of Congress, and that there's not an absolute leeway for Congress to just use our tax dollars however they want. And there is a precedent in this case, Slass versus Cohen from 1968, where the Supreme Court upheld the standing of federal income taxpayers to sue. And in that case, it wasn't Congress, but it was local government officials using tax dollars for private religious schooling purposes. And so they sued and said that breaches the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, and I believe that they won. So, we're saying just like if you can't use our tax dollars to build a private religious schools, you certainly can't use our tax dollars to exterminate people and carry out genocide. In terms of the other federal laws in play, like the Leahy Amendment, that's after Patrick Leahy, the former senator, and to try to prohibit U.S. military assistance and aid from going to security units in foreign security units that are guilty of gross human rights violations. And in theory, that the State Department is supposed to do a vetting ahead of time before it disperses the aid. And Patrick Leahy himself has come out and said in an op-ed not that long ago that there's one country that his own law doesn't seem to apply to, and that's Israel. If I remember right, the vetting is done post facto, not ahead of time. So, and it's heavily weighted on. And of course, they've never found a single instance where they should cut off aid to Israeli security units, even though there's widespread evidence of gross human rights violations before, of course, the current genocide, but certainly after. So there's another lawsuit that some of you heard about that just dropped the same week ours did by coincidence against the State Department. And that's being filed by Dawn. That's the organization that Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist who was murdered in the embassy, the Saudi embassy in Turkey. He founded this human rights group, and they're filing a lawsuit again with Palestinian plaintiffs against the State Department for violating Leahy. But it's also relevant to our case too. We're saying you not only did you violate the Constitution, not only have you violated international law, but you violated your own federal laws, like the Leahy Amendment, and that you can't use our tax dollars to do that.
Thank you for that. I think that you're getting into a few different things that are very endemic to making a clear path to have this, maybe having a sympathetic judge, give it a hearing. So that's great to hear. Carol Francis, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. This is really, really exciting. When you spoke of the different grounds for choosing somebody as a target, you mentioned taking bribes. Does this mean targeting a congressperson because of taking lots of AIPAC money?
Well, I wish. Apparently the number one recipient of AIPAC money in the U.S. government was Biden, right? No, I mean, like, I think by that they mean, like, of course, to us that would be bribery, but they would have a much more narrowly constructed definition of bribery. Like, what was that congressman out of New Jersey recently got busted for bribery?
Menendez.
Yeah, yeah. So, so that's the kind of thing where we're testing the boundaries here, and I think in a really important way, politically and legally, is we're saying it, it's an illegal act can actually be voting to create a law in full violation of the Constitution and international law, that there's an individual accountability. If you use your voting power to create something like to perpetuate genocide, or let's say hypothetically they pass a law to reinstitute slavery, and they could say, well, we're immune. We would also say, no, we're going after you as individuals because you violated a whole host of things to reinstitute the Slavery Act. But right now, they look at it more when they talk about boundary exceptions to immunity. They have more ideas like what happened to Menendez in New Jersey.
So there's something to learn from that, because I think it was another congressperson that had their money in a freezer and one that had their money in an oven. And I know one of our board members was talking about having some work done on their appliances. So I would caution to make sure none of that ends up in your refrigerator or anything like that. Vinny, you had a question.
Hey, two things. First, a point, a little silver lining in a cloud, as Stephen well knows, and I believe Marcy as well. Two individuals that were involved with Assange defense, Margaret Kunstler and Deborah Hebrick, along with two other individuals, had their devices confiscated at the Ecuadorian embassy, and they sued the CIA. And the same type of restrictions that occur preventing people for reasons of national security from a very courageous judge, Judge Cottle, allowed that suit to go through. So although incredibly difficult, it is possible with the right judge. My question is one that Marcy and I were discussing in the chat, and that is our a former congressman, Adam Schiff, who is one of the worst,
Oh, yeah.
is now our senator. And Marcy said, well, he wasn't a senator when this happened, so we can't sue him. But his actions as a Congress, and Congress holds the purse strings, would we be able to sue him the same way we could sue another odious individual, Alex Padilla, along if we move forward, not if, when we move forward with this effort? And by the way, Seth, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Great question. And yeah, Schiff also voted to support the invasion of Iraq, if I remember right. And, he wanted to grandstand as if he was so progressive in taking on Trump. But yeah, Schiff was what matters, the liability is who was a representative or a senator and when the vote went down. So for the House, it was April 20th. And for the Senate, it was, I think, April 30th. And in the Senate, they combined. So the House just voted, it was called the Israel Supplemental Security Act, where it was at 26.38 billion. And it was just by itself. And Schiff, I'm sure he voted. I know he voted for that. I think you can look at the record. And there are some reps that didn't in California, and that's to our favor politically and legally, because we can say, look, people had a choice. Barbara Lee out of Oakland, for example, out of Alameda, did not vote for it. And so Ro Khanna in the San Jose area did not vote for it. But Schiff could be sued for that vote he did back when he was rep. And then in terms of Padilla, it would have to be who was senator then. So it would be Padilla and Butler. Both of them, we checked, voted on April 30th in the combined package, where they voted to re-up to 26+ billion to Israel, and it was lumped together with billions to the Ukraine and to Taiwan. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to make way. Anyone who needs to raise their physical hand, if they're not using the Zoom hand, I will give way to others because I want as many of your comments and questions to come in to this conversation as possible. Seth, I wanted to, first of all, after January 20, I think there's an individual who's vulnerable because he's a convicted felon as of today. And I think it might be very appropriate, and how vulnerable a convicted felon would be, to be named, because the President of the United States has to sign the laws that Congress passes. And if Trump signs laws to send weapons to Israel or do anything else, then I think he is vulnerable to this theory as well. But I wanted to shift slightly, Seth, to the extent you have this knowledge. You mentioned the Center for Constitutional Rights. And what CCR has done since its founding is to understand that lawsuits provide a forum. We've already cataloged the obstacles that American law puts in the way. But from the Chicago 7 to political lawsuits around the country and in our history, lawsuits, if they can make it at least into initial hearings with affidavits, declarations, with witnesses, there have been tribunals that have been convened for this purpose to litigate the Vietnam War and its illegality. So it is the work of creative lawyers and creative activists like you to create these opportunities to expose to the American people and the world the illegality of what is going on. So I believe you're a student of some of this work, and tell us why you see this lawsuit, even if it's an uphill struggle, as an open forum to expose the underlying genocide and the U.S. complicity.
Yeah, it's so true that the solid synergy that can happen between movement, as part of the broader movement of activist attorneys and other activists like myself. You know, um, I used to live in Chicago in the 90s, and the People's Law Office there, which Flint Taylor and the People's Law, amazing people, and Jeffrey Haas, and there they were taking on the big issue of police torture in the Chicago Police Department. It was this very advanced strategy that between the legal and the political, and eventually it resulted in getting this notorious police commander, John Birch, fired, but then there was people that he had tortured who were on death row, and then there was an ongoing fight, and that was part of what led to ultimately the death penalty being avoided out ironically, by a Republican governor, George Ryan, So there is that kind of interplay. And in this case, this argument about our tax dollars is hitting such a nerve with people because we've been living with it. We've been living with the forced complicity. And for people who are Palestinian, it's the forced complicity to participate in the destruction of your own people. Some of our plaintiffs have spoken very powerfully to that. And for Jewish class members in plaintiff, it's like saying that never again means never again, and yet being forced into this complicity in genocide. And that has created a very real harm. And that's also part of this argument, is that as a class, there is a moral injury to forced complicity in genocide. And that has affected individuals in different ways. We're certainly not trying to say our harm is anywhere near, of course, the harm being done is a genocide against the Palestinians. It's a fundamental harm. But there is a harm to people here. And should the lawsuit prevail, that will be part of the thing, is damages seeking for that harm. And we, as a class, are going to donate every penny to the Palestinian people, But that the combination of taxes being so visceral, like that's our money that we're paying and being used illegally to destroy our fellow human beings, and to live with that kind of harm. I mean, there's been people who have been dealing with extreme depression, and I mean, and that's also part of pushing boundary open and saying, look, there is interdependence between all of us, and this is actually creating great harm to people to be as a high school teacher, I would see, what can happen to young people if they're being forced into situations in terms of their mental health, So that's part of our argument.
No, that's a very good point. So we have 3 hands up and about 10 minutes before we get into our extended reflection. So I want to make sure we have time for everybody. So Quanta, if you can have a short question or
I have a quick question. Is this lawsuit also dependent upon the state laws itself? And for instance, I live in North Carolina. We have to consider the regional culture as well. I'm sure you understand. So would it be helpful for us to find, sort of kind of guidelines, okay, step by step, like find a good lawyer, find an organization, etc. I am involved with MAPA, World Beyond War, and also War Resistance Network. So I have some organizations, but does that organization have to be originated in the state itself? So that's what I was wondering.
So yeah, first of all, I really hope, Quanta, that you can make it to the webinar on the 25th, if possible. If you're in North Carolina, that would be at 1 p.m. your time, Saturday. Because there's people all across the country. We're expecting hundreds. Already, one of our comrades has been going through the emails. She's gotten 300 plus emails from around the country and different parts of California saying, how can we do this? So you're not alone in that question. It doesn't matter where you are. The federal law, I mean, like this case is based on federal law, so there's no idiosyncrasies that would apply in terms of there's no state laws that would interfere with the lawsuit. Like who's your rep in the House?
I think it's Richard Burr and Tom Tillis.
Mm-hmm. Well, once you know, I would guess that he voted to send the billions in military aid on April 20th, then you have the exact same case we do. It's just, and same with your the senators out of North Carolina,
Well, those are the senators and the Congress people, this Alma in my district. But I'll find those. That's not
Yeah, feel free to email, I'll put my phone number in the chat too if any of you want to talk more directly. Yeah.
so much.
Sounds good. Don, you had your hand up too, so.
Yeah, thank you. It's more like a statement or a comment. It's been just looking at Guantanamo Bay and what Israel has been doing to the Palestinians since, the 40s. It's like, it's so parallel.
Yeah.
And then for me, it's like, I wish my mom was just on and she just dropped off. We've been fighting this thing since the 70s when my uncle lost his home in Palestine. The frustration as an Arab American is just so overwhelming. I feel powerless, and I also feel like there's no hope sometimes. And that's why I come to this group, because it kind of gives me a little bit of hope. It's just the insanity of what goes on over there. That's why I like going on, helping the refugees in the Middle East, because I feel like it's a tangible thing to be with people over there, but they think we're nuts. Arabs think we're absolutely insane, and we're bombing. They're getting bombs dropped on their heads, built in America, but then we turn around and offer them aid. It just doesn't make any sense. And it's just like, I'll be going back to the Middle East in June, and it's like this cycle that just never ends. And I guess my comment is, it's like, how do you get hope when you just feel like hopeless? I mean, we still haven't got anything. My uncle family never got anything for his 2 pharmacies and his home that was taken. And I have a friend that still has a deed to where the airport in Israel is built, one of the airports is built. And they still have deed to that. It's just like a frustrating, never-ending cycle of insanity. Sometimes I just feel pretty hopeless, to be honest with you. But anyway,
yeah.
Sorry for venting.
No. I mean, that's also why, even though it's, again, our eyes are wide open about the courts, but there's a sense of hope that comes from actually having us more directly taking on, the more directly taking on the source, our tax dollars and these. There's a factory right nearby here in Sonoma County in Hillsburg, General Dynamics, that helps make the inputs for the 2,000-pound bombs. And that's our tax dollars cycling right into the private profits of that company. It's very concrete. It's right there, But just being able to more directly go to it and say, this is illegal, you can't do this, and we're going to organize by the thousands to stop it and hold you accountable.
Yeah.
This forced complicity is just, wow, that's just such a great thing to educate people on. Besides the mental health issue of people having to deal with it, there's the issue of blowback. Obviously, it endangers our life to make the world hate the people of the United States. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say very briefly that I think one idea that people might want to embrace is that it's kind of like the idea of gun regulation. Even if you can't the purpose is not to outlaw every weapon. It's the process is to make it harder for someone who wants to use those weapons in mass destruction of people, in a short amount of time, make it harder for them to be able to get the weapon in the first place. And I think in a way, that's the way you think of lawsuits as well, is that's another hoop that an organization or a corporation needs to jump through in order to get through the process. And even if you're just if you're creating billable hours that a company has to pay out that they didn't figure on in Q3 that they have to do in Q4, you are impeding the process of them being able to use predatory capitalism for their own gains, right? So I'm sorry, Steve, you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Well, just as we begin to wrap up, first of all, Don, don't lose hope. One reason we're here is to provide hope. And we also know that hope is necessary but not sufficient. Hope has to be combined with action. That's what Seth's doing, and that's what we're doing. And we're going to stand shoulder to shoulder with Taxpayers Against Genocide and continue to see this through. Now, we do have our work cut out for us. It just popped up that the House of Representatives voted to complain about the International Criminal Court issuing arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu and former military chief Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity. This is an international court. It took a year of investigation for them to issue arrest warrants, and they also issued one against a Hamas leader, rebutting any notion that this is an anti-Semitic act. Yet, the House of Representatives of the United States of America, what action do they take? They attack the court. They attack the International Criminal Court, and 45 Democrats joined 198 Republicans to approve the Illegitimate Court Counteraction Act. So that's your work today, activists. Call these congressmen, call your senators, block this bill in the Senate. It is shameful, but it's the kind of battle we have before us, and it's exactly why it is only this kind of activism that is going to offset any despair or hopelessness that we feel. Our enemies depend on hopelessness. They want us to shy away, go off, sit on the couch, and do nothing. And that's why this organization exists. That's why we invite people like you, Seth. You are now a card-carrying member of ICUJP. Your membership is in good standing. And you've seen people keep coming back because you will get announcements of future Friday forums where we're going to persist with programs of this kind to spread this kind of information and to activate people. So thank you, Seth. Thanks everybody who joined us. Rick will now preside over our closing circle.
Would it just be okay to say one last thing?
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, but just before the closing circle. First of all, I mean, this has been amazing. I didn't, obviously I knew it would be a wonderful mix of people, but what a great turnout you all have, and so happy to be here. And if definitely, for sure, keep me on the list. And then for folks that are here, if you want to spread out the invitation for the webinar to your various organizations, whether it's World Beyond War or other groups, just let me know, and we have an invitation. I mean, you have the link, so you can push that out, and the link describes the webinar, but and feel free to share the link tree with anybody and everybody. But We also have some text inviting folks, an email text for the webinar. So if you like that, just let me know. And I'll also put my personal email in the chat here too. That would be a little bit easier to stay in touch.
And Seth, if you want to send me that link, I can push it out to the broader ICUJP.
That'd be great.
Email folks.
And did I understand that right? That you all just decided to endorse earlier with the board?
Yes.
So we can put you down as one of the orgs endorsing?
Yeah.
And I would be able to sign for the group. So if there's, I think you already sent that out. So we'll discuss it after.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. That's super exciting. People here will be jazzed.
Good. I'm very glad you could join us.
Yeah.
Stay with us, Seth, if you're able.
I will. Mm-hmm.
I wanted to thank Seth and Rebecca and Haris earlier for their presentations plural, and we wanted to put this time together for the folks that join us, so because I think obviously the overriding thoughts that we have are for our fellow, our friends and our neighbors, even some of the folks that normally join us for this ICUJP call on Friday mornings have been viscerally and personally affected by the horrible fires that have happened in Southern California over the last few days. And what we wanted to do is basically open this up as a group reflection and a group time to be able to say what we would like. If there's anybody or any group of people that you want to lift up, please do so. I wanted to maybe start out by talking about two different groups of folks: the amazing first responders, the fire folks, emergency folks that have selflessly, from other states, from other parts of California, from other countries, from Mexico, have come in and helped with trying to contain what is still active fires that are happening in Southern California. That's, they expect that to be part of the job when they sign up, and they do it selflessly. Also, I want to hold up and make sure that we know that there are people that are working on those front lines that are part of the prison system, because with a lot of the choices that prisoners can make in California for places that they want to work on, one of them is working for Cal Fire and other groups, and they're getting paid basically maybe $10.50 an hour as slave labor. People that are incarcerated are working as slave labor. Unfortunately, Proposition 6 did not pass in California, so that is still happening. But I want us to keep those people in mind too. So I'm opening up the floor to just anybody who would like to speak.
Yeah, I just mentioned that the Dina Nation also sent firefighters here. I did want to lift up Maureen Cruz. I don't know if people know Maureen from Healthcare for Us, and her house was burned to the ground. They got away all right, but with almost nothing. She's staying with her son in Redondo Beach. But that's one of thousands and thousands of people who have been burned out, obviously.
Vinny.
Fire started walking distance from my house, an assisted living facility that my mother lived in before she passed, burned to the ground. And I mean, walking distance from my house. So the night that my wife and I were thinking about evacuating, I looked around my house and I saw all the possessions we've gathered over the last 50 years together. And I thought, what do I take? And in the end, I thought I'd take nothing. because I thought when I came back, there would be nothing left, as many of my friends and neighbors have experienced. And I had an epiphany, and it was an epiphany. I'd like to raise this group up. I thought to myself, all that stuff I have is just stuff. My wife, and Rick, you'll be happy to hear this, my cat, are the things that are important to me. And I realized that it is people like the ICUJP and Code Pink and so many other groups, MAPPA and all of the other groups that we've been in effort in, they raise us all up and they make our lives better. And they, you, all of you, are the important things. Thank you.
I hope I can say with Steve's permission that your cat is also a card-carrying member of ICUJP. He has to pay a fee, though.
His name is Greenberg, so I'm not certain whether he is practicing.
That's good. Jasmine, you had your hand.
Can we lift up the family of Greta and family? She's in a hotel and she called my grandmother and let us know that everything is gone. So Greta, her name is Greta. Please keep her in your prayers.
Okay, I just want to say, as heartbreaking as it is to think of our friends like Maureen and people that we don't know who's lost everything in the fire, I appreciate what somebody said earlier about having it make us think more about the people who were unhoused and had nothing to burn down, nothing to lose. But I want to bring up the people in Gaza. May this horrible tragedy in Los Angeles make us more conscious of people who have lost their homes in either Gaza or the West Bank.
Don, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. As my mom mentioned earlier, her cousins lost everything. They're on Sunset Boulevard somewhere, Pacific Palisades. I used to go there when I was a kid. It's been in the family for such a long time. Lost so much stuff. So I volunteered to go down there and take my truck and help my cousin who's, she's elderly and she's in a walker, so I might come visit you guys. But, we're still rebuilding from in Santa Cruz from the CSC, the fire we had, still rebuilding. It's a long process. It's a long process. So my hearts go out to them.
Yep, and I hope as well as understanding how it is for people that are unhoused, I hope this is maybe a wake up for people to understand how visceral the issue of climate change is. And maybe they'll understand now that this is unprecedented. So, Steve.
I think every one of us knows, I've said this in a different way, by one step removed, or friends, direct friends who've lost their homes. I want to mention on this screen that so far Anthony Manousis has evacuated his home. I don't have any current information if he was able to return. You think so, Rick?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. But it's still in great jeopardy. We're seeing a lot of signs of goodness. My son lives in Venice, and he has volunteered with the World Central Kitchen. So there are lots of opportunities throughout Southern California for folks living there to do that, because there is going to be a need for food and service and help. And I'm sure there are websites and resources available all over. But this is a moment, if you have time, if you have energy, and if you've secured your own home, to step out and do something for everybody else. I think we're going to have to take great account of how LA gets rebuilt, and I'm glad that Rick put his finger on the question of climate change. We cannot exist with those who call that a myth. And human agency has contributed to this disaster in so many ways. The floor is still open. Ruby, if you're with us and can begin to prepare a closing prayer. This is our regular closing circle, so I just want to offer the mother of a dear friend of ours, Jean's mother died only days ago. So that kind of loss continues as well.
This is Michael. Yeah, I wanted to lift up Greg Foisey, also was very active for many, many years with Changelinks and KPFK and Arlington West, and he is dealing with the need for dialysis. I don't know, are we taking announcements also?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so also on the 25th, there is a webinar. Thankfully, it does not conflict with the one that we've just been talking about. It'll be in the evening. It's 4 p.m. Pacific. Pacifica Fight Back and the Friends of Community Media, which is based in Kansas City, Missouri, is doing a national sort of town hall on the Project 2025, and I'm not sure what it's been renamed, but 9495, HR 9495, which targets nonprofits that allegedly support terrorism. And if you don't think they include ICUJP in that, wake up, because they do. Mike Johnson already sent a tweet to Jewish Voice for Peace and Alliance for Global Justice, which is the fiscal sponsor for Changelinks, among other projects, that they want the IRS to remove their nonprofit status. And so that's going to be the 25th. I'll put it in the chat. It's 4 p.m. Pacific, but it will be a national town hall. And I just want to say that unfortunately, the new management at KPFK has removed all the indigenous and environmental program that I put on. A lot of the locally produced programs at 4, 5, and 6 o'clock. They're rerunning. Democracy Now! Is a fine program, and Letters in Politics, but they already air them during the morning. But they took off Creative Frontline, Be a Better Relative, California Solotopia, XR Now from Extinction Rebellion, Eco Justice. All those programs are removed. Radio Insurrection from Stop LAPD Spying, Dennis Bernstein's Flashpoint Show, and now they're airing the KPFA news instead of the local news. So just be aware that.
Let me grab this moment to publicly thank Michael Novak for his leadership, who volunteered without pay to lead and to try to restore and rebuild KPFK. Michael, we're immensely grateful to you. It is shameful that you are no longer at KPFK. We can only hope that an independent source of news and information like that can survive. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Rick, I was also remiss that Rebecca Avila on our board was evacuated, but from text, she appears to have been able to return home safely.
Yeah, and Fidel.
And Fidel was evacuated.
And I think one of the reasons that Dave Clennon isn't on is because he is housing a few people that were evacuated. So, and please, Ruby, if you can close us out.
And what, as I said, we're not closing, we're opening. We're opening to a better world. For whatever reason these fires were, we know God is still over all of the plan. And when we think of the strength of LA County, and we think of Rick as a first responder from all over, and Michael and Darlene Cruz having released their property, and Nolan and Jackie Daniels, and any of the others that haven't been spoken, or fear, or their property is going, we know there's still God's plan, and there's still a divine purpose for each one of us in the love and the light of all of our families and friends that are going through these things. So I know right now in the opportunities of what was called the World Central Kitchen, and anything that was depending on the hopelessness or homelessness or anyone that is forgiving or unforgiving or need to release, that they can go forward with positive changes in their hearts, their minds, their spirits, and their lives. I'm grateful for the support of this thing we call International Community United for Justice and Peace and its continued growth. And this is world growth and support. I'm grateful for peace that anyone in here has spoken or not spoken. Still, their light and their enlightenment is coming forward into truth. And as I know this and more, all languages, all nationalities, all spirits, all religions, it's still one power. And I'm grateful for this divine in thanksgiving and prayer and the light and love. As I pass and know that God is, and so it is. Amen.
Amen. Let me thank Rick for corralling the cats and keeping the meeting well organized, to all of our speakers, to all of you for finding some time to join us. Please join us again next Friday and every Friday. We're going to do this. We're going to resist and stand shoulder to shoulder with each one of you. Be safe this weekend in whatever situation you're in. Do something good today to help others. Thanks, everybody.